Hello everybody, good morning and welcome to Live at the Waterhole. We're first up, we're in Namibia and the Etosha National Park at the Okokoyo Waterhole. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and as per usual, what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax and enjoy watching the animals coming down to the waterhole. I'm pretty sure that it's going to be another scorcher today, so that does bode well for us as the animals will come down to cool off and quench their thirsts. Now, as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth, also on the YouTube live chat. Now, looks like a little bit of a westerly breeze, or easterly, should I say, blowing across the waterhole here towards the west, and that is normally a hot wind as well. So it's probably going to make the animals rather thirsty. We've had a lot of elephant activity over the last while with all the heat. And speaking of that, let's go and have a look what the weather's going to be like across all the different locations.
And then the next one.
So it seems like a little bit of a mixed bag. There's some rain at certain locations, and that does normally mean that the animals aren't that thirsty in those spots. It's not as hot, and there's water around, so they don't need to concentrate around those permanent water holes. So we'll probably be frequenting mostly the areas that are hot, including here in the Etosha National Park. Looks like around the Lowveld, a bit of rain, as well as up into East Africa at Old Donyo in Kenya, but not, a little bit of a cloud in the sky there, just up above the leadwood tree on the left, but nothing in the terms of rain. So elephants and more elephants. That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah. It's the pied crow. So we find the Cape crow, the one that
we also had quite a few giraffe coming through here yesterday as well. Always lovely to see them zigzag through the background and make their way all the way down, sometimes taking quite a long time to get here. And anything can give them a fright, even a little dove flitting past, and then they start the whole process all over again. I always say to my guests here in Etosha, this is the festival of wildlife at this particular waterhole. At this time of year, very dry, very hot, and so it does force the animals to want to come and drink. So mostly springbok, lots and lots of them, but there's also some oryx, or gemsbok, as we call them, gamsebok in German. I think there might be also some zebra there in the background, maybe a splattering of blue wildebeest as well. Well, there must be a little bit more clouds in the sky than I thought, because it is going a little bit darker now. So I think that there are a couple of clouds just covering the sun. This time of year, it is the period for light rain in Namibia. That's in general, on average, but normally the bigger rain's coming around January, February. It's always lovely to see the springbok. They either walk or they've got that little trot, and then when they start picking up speed, they also normally join that with a pronk, with their legs sort of bent straight out and their heads down, and their very typical pronk, giving them the name of springbuck. So an impala, they stot, which is bouncing between their front and their back legs. And they also do it for some same reasons that springbok do it, showing off their prowess and also trying to indicate to predators that they are very strong and they're not going to be easily caught. And so the springbok do the same, but they've got a very typical bounce and they can jump up to about 2 meters in the air. So, Ethan, thanks for your comment. And you saying that you really like the white bellies of the springbok. It is a very particular coat that the springbok do have. And all the desert adapted species, the ones that are true desert animals, have white bellies, helping to reflect the heat back off the ground. Oryx, very similar, same white belly. And of course, the little ground squirrel, much smaller example, but for the exact same reasons. And all those animals never have to drink water in their entire lives. If it's available, such as here, they will drink, but they don't need to. They can actually survive without it completely. And I always find it amusing and strange and unique that the animals that probably require water the least in the springbok and the oryx, they enjoy the water the most here at the Okukuyo Waterhole, partaking in a bit of dipping and swimming and wading in, as we see this one doing now. I think it's a lovely cool off for them. The other animals that require water and drink every single day, they're not so quick to go in for a dip as these guys are. And the youngsters now running off there in the background. I'm not sure exactly what spooked these springbok, but it can just be sometimes one of them has run off and that's made them all alert, all a bit nervous. And it's an anti-predator strategy. If something else is running, you best do it as well, and you might survive. It's a nice big group of zebra coming in. They're not a truly desert adapted animal, so they require water on a regular basis. They need to drink every single day. And so if there wasn't any water, they wouldn't be able to survive. So when you go into the areas where there aren't permanent water holes, such as in the south of Namibia, you won't find any Birchall's zebra, but you will find the Hartmann's mountain zebra, which is another desert adapted species. And similar to the Cape Mountain zebra, they also don't need to drink water in their lives. So water independent, and as their name suggests, they prefer staying up in the mountains. So they will have water access after it rains, but they can go for months without it. They do live in much smaller groups, and they are a lot smaller and sleeker in their anatomy than the Birchall zebra. So you do get Hartmann's mountain zebra in the Etosha National Park, but they found mostly in the area directly in which we are looking to the west, and there's a lot of dolomite sort of mountains that they like to frequent. So you don't often get to see them. It's only when you cross through the western side. Previously closed off to the public, was only open to local tour operators. And so I got to go through there even when there wasn't any tourist activity. And we often get to see them on that side. There's also white rhino that we get to see, but not as much. Here we would see black rhino at night around this waterhole. You really feel a kind of ebb and flow at this spot. Animals come in, there can be hundreds at stages, and then sometimes it does empty out a bit, but it's not long. The animals do return. So something interesting to talk about is, down to the heat that I want to just chat on, is obviously it can get upwards of 40 degrees here in Etosha. And when I take my guests out on safari, when we're doing our long haul trips, between locations and driving through the heat of the day, then I will use air conditioner in the vehicle. Because normally game drives we wouldn't be going out in the heat of the day, so there's opportunity. For instance, if we were in Etosha in the middle of the day, you can go for a swim at the swimming pool. But when we go out in the mornings and in the late afternoons, I generally don't use the air conditioner because, firstly, you need to keep your windows closed for that to work properly. And so you miss out on a lot of the sounds of the bush. And secondly, is that when you use your air conditioner in the vehicle, it gets to an artificial temperature. It's nice and cool, but as soon as you stop and you switch off, which is much better in sightings, and you open your windows, it's extremely stifling, the heat as it comes into the vehicle. So I try to acclimatize the guests a little bit more to the heat and rather use wind to cool off and have some nice cool water in the fridge. And that for me, much better way because it just allows for a much better experience as well as being more acclimatized. There's nothing more terrible than being in a nice cool vehicle. And as soon as you stop and open the door to get out, and you go from about 18 degrees, 22 degrees in the vehicle to 45 degrees outdoors, it's pretty bad. So I think it's quite a shock to the system. So I rather keep that sort of change in temperature a little bit more mild, and in so doing also have a more of a bush experience. And you'll also notice when you do pull up into sightings that a lot of vehicles of tourists, they remain running because they're keeping their air conditioner and the temperature nice and cool in the vehicle, which then does detract from the lovely bush experience that you're trying to have with whatever animal is in that sighting. So just a note on that from me. I generally try to steer away from using the air conditioner as much as possible. And I think it just makes for a much better wildlife experience. Something we use out in the desert here is just a little spray bottle of water. So you just spray your face every now and then, and I tell you what, it evaporates within seconds, but it does have a lovely cooling effect. So that's a better way to keep cool than keeping the air conditioner running all the time. Ah, there's a giraffe off in the distance, probably going to do its zigzag as it comes through for a drink. They're probably the animal that takes the longest to get down to the waterhole. There, it's already stopped, scanning, checking, making sure before it approaches. So, Gareth, yeah, good question about the stress that the animals need to deal with predators. So it does affect them quite a lot, and you have this kind of predator pressure. So the animals will be rather skittish. You see them very skittish here for a reason. If there weren't lions and leopards and hyenas here, you find that the animals start becoming very relaxed. You'll see a lot of them sleeping and lying down more. So having predators, it really keeps them on their toes, or they walk on their toes permanently. But anyway, uh, so it does add to quite a large amount of anxiety and stress, but it's important to actually have that because it keeps the animals fit and healthy. When you see animals in reserves, private game farms, etc., that don't have predators, you can actually see the animals almost become slightly unhealthy, a little bit more fat. They don't run as much. There's a little bit of fighting, within their own species, jostling for um, the patriarchy or the matriarchy. But other than that, they don't really have anything to keep them fit. So it's it's part of a natural balance to have the predators and to keep the antelope and the prey species on their toes, and in so doing actually keeps them a lot more healthy than if they weren't. So, but Gareth, that's a lovely question, and I want to continue on with that theme. And I've found something on the British Ecological Society that says apex predators occupy the highest trophic positions in food webs, as we know, they're the top rung, and serve profoundly important roles in ecological and evolutionary processes, shaping and reshaping the traits of prey and how they interact with one another as well as the ecosystem.
Africam brings the wild to you. Watch the big five at our Waterhole cameras. Indulge your passion for birding with the black eagles on the Black Eagle camera, flamingos at Camphor's Dam, and penguins at Stony Point. Listen to the soothing sounds of Lisbon Falls, or witness animals up close at Cat-Eye Pan. Imagine you're at the hide at Aldonyo Lodge, gazing at elephants with the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro as your backdrop. Join us at Africam for an extraordinary wildlife adventure.
Very difficult to exterminate them. The likes of leopard, spotted hyena, and lions have been exterminated from very good farming regions, and being in the Cape Floral Kingdom and the Sweetveld, excellent area for game, for livestock, for agriculture, etc. And apex predators being a problem for human livelihoods. So they were exterminated, and then you find that the animals become lazy, the populations almost stagnate. You have bush encroachment, So it does really affect it. And then once you reintroduce the predators, the animals really struggle to adapt once more. But it does happen quite quickly. We've seen in areas where they've reintroduced cheetah, where there were no predators previously. Um, and in a particular instance on Amakala Game Reserve, where on a specific property, there were no predators, only brown hyena, but they don't generally actively hunt and take down animals on a regular basis. So the animals become lethargic, they become relaxed, they become fat. And with the reintroduction of a three male coalition of cheetah, they were taking down and still are. Well, for now, there's one that's had a broken leg, so they're in a boma. But they were taking down massive prey. They're taking down adult hartebeest, adult eland, adult kudu bulls, and females. Which is something almost unheard of. For me, it is unheard of. I know that they have done this in certain places in the past, but not at the level that we saw there. So those animals are now having to readjust, and some of them would never have seen a predator in their life. So their levels of alertness during the night sort of dwindles and diminishes, and they need to relearn. So just like humans, if we don't sort of live in the wild and have our senses about us, our sense of smell, sight, hearing, etc., it takes a bit of time for them to relearn and get fit enough to be able to evade those predators. We also do notice here at this Okokuyo waterhole that the animals drink a lot. You don't often see that at all the different locations. How much, if you actually watch the amount that they're taking in. Yes, elephants across the board they drink a lot, just for their daily water requirement. But here, I'm pretty sure that a lot of these animals would come in, only every few days, especially the likes of springbok and oryx. So they're almost getting their fill for the for quite an extended period thereafter. Um, and it's just interesting for me to note the difference in the amount of water consumed here as opposed to the other spots. So, Wally, no, we don't get woodland kingfishers here in Etosha. Um, I think it's potentially down to just how dry it is. You will get woodland kingfisher in Namibia, but not in the Etosha National Park. Never have I ever heard any woodland kingfisher, but towards the central parts of Namibia, as well as up into the Caprivi, yes, there we will get them. But a lot of the sort of birds that are not able to live in such a dry habitat wouldn't be coming through here, but a lot of endemics and specialists that will occur in these parks, and further south into the desert itself. So birds like the Ludwig's bustard, Rupel's koran, quite a few different hornbills. We have the Damara hornbill, um, as well as dune larks, track chats. So lots of special birds, chestnut weavers. Um, just thinking of any others I can think of. Looks like we got a heron that's just arrived in there. I think it's a heron. He'll just be a short-time visitor, but he's coming there in the middle of all these arriving blue wildebeest. Sorry about that. A little bit of a break up in our picture, so we'll try and sort that out. In the meantime, we've headed into the low veld where it's a little bit of inclement weather, and we're at the Djuma Game Reserve in the Greater Kruger National Park. Nice to see some Egyptian geese joined in with these common impala. If we go back to Okukoyo at some stage, between them, and a lot of these female impala will be just about ready to drop. I do believe that there has been the first lamb seen for the season, and it normally coincides within a day or two of the arrival of the woodland kingfisher. So I'm pretty sure we will be hearing them calling from now on as well. Maybe not so on such a windy and chilly day, but normally when they do arrive, they really announce themselves. So I'm expecting some of their calls. Now, on a cooler day like this, it's quite a good idea to watch prey species such as impala because leopards can move around all day, but they'll do so more when it's cool like this. So there's every chance that we might see one of our leopard characters here to Djuma Waterhole. So I hear that there have been lions spotted in these parts, but probably lying up in the shade. But if we get a chance, we might get to see them. Lenny, so good question around the horns and when they occur on males and females. So when we look at impala, you can see the only the males have horns. And what we would generally say is that it centers mostly around where they put their preferred habitat. An impala generally prefers staying more around the thickets. Yes, they are mixed feeders, so they will go out into the grasslands as well, but not so much. They're mostly comfortable where there's quite a bit of brush, bush, and thickets that they can then move through. They're very agile, but they're not extremely fast on the long run. So they're more agile, like to stay in the thickets. And so those animals that prefer staying in the bush and the thicket type animals, they have only horns in the males. So we look at impala, we look at bushbuck, nyala, kudu, all of those, only the males have horns. And the animals that prefer staying out in the open plains on the grasslands, those normally both male and females have horns, like blue wildebeest, springbok, hartebeest, eland, and I can hear a woodland kingfisher calling in the background. So, and moreover, the animals that stay out on the plain, obviously, then their defense is mainly to run away, and secondary defense would then be to use the horns. And so they're not able to then evade predators by jumping through the thickets and being agile like kudu and impala would be doing. So I think it's mainly down to their defense strategies and where they actually live. So quite a bit of wind, and it looks like rain coming through with it as well. But lucky for us, we don't have to be out there in it. We can still watch, even though it's raining. And I must say that it's often the case that predators actually start hunting when it's raining because it dampens their smell, and also the sound of them moving through. So the prey species wouldn't necessarily be able to smell them as well as hear them if they're walking through the brush and they break a branch or something. That would be an immediate indicator. But with all the wind and the rain, they wouldn't be able to hear that. So it does give predators the upper hand. Sounds like Dewey is also saying hello, the resident male hippo. I think that call was probably coming from him. So you can see a lot of these females with swollen bellies, and all ready to pop. Looking closely at their face, you can see that black marking on the top of their head and coming down a little bit, and there's a little bit below the eye. Those black-faced impala, obviously that is a lot broader and a lot thicker in the black stripes, obviously giving them their name. So we may see these impala a little bit more nervous. I think the wind's blowing in the wrong direction, but apparently it was the Talamati breakaway lions that were seen here this morning, but they've moved a little bit closer to the lodge, which is in the direction the wind's blowing. So these impala won't be downwind from them right now, and maybe why they're still so relaxed. But as soon as if the wind swirls or anything, we might see them all of a sudden getting a spook and running off. And interesting to note with impala is that when the rutting season kicks off, it's the shortening of days as we head into winter that triggers an increase in testosterone in the rams. So they then all of a sudden start fighting with each other, fighting for dominance, and then start to mate with the females and taking on a group of females, and continuously fighting from there. And then it does start to wear off. And they've, the females have been covered, etc. And then the males start forming bachelor herds, and they're quite relaxed around each other. But at this time of the year, when the females start dropping their lambs, there's a lot of increase in estrogen in the air and in the middens. And so it does trigger a second false rut with the rams, and then you can often see them fighting again, almost trying to prepare to mate once more because of all of that estrogen around. But as I say, it is termed a false rut, and can make them fight quite a bit, but it doesn't result in mating. And a couple of reasons why impala are so successful, because they're not specialists, they're generalists, they're mixed feeders. They can live and feed on grass and leaves and a real variety of plants. So they're able to survive in different areas, and they're very agile, and able to evade predators. They have synchronized dropping of the lambs. So once you start seeing a couple of them dropping a lambs, you can almost have overnight, there's hundreds of babies all at the same time. So you do have a lot of babies getting taken by predators at this time, but they grow very fast. And so a lot and a big majority of the babies make it through into adulthood. So another very good reason why they are so successful, as well as this metatarsal gland that they have on their back legs, apparently is also part of this reason. It helps them to keep together as a group, even if they disperse when there is a predator around. They're also very, very alert, very similar to the likes of monkeys, where they can pick up predators very quickly. With them being so alert and normally in big groups, they have lots of eyes and ears and noses in particular to pick up for predators. They also partake in allo grooming, so they take care of each other as a group and as a system. So it does assist in helping them to be as successful as they are. I always find the look of an Egyptian goose is that he's very startled and wide-eyed. It's almost like he's had 10 cups of coffee. So you can see also a very different outlook here in Djuma. It's rather grey and lots of wind, and when we just contrast that with the colors that are exploding at Okukuyo, with the blue sky and with a little dashing of white clouds, and then the white of the calcrete rocks and the blue of the water, it's for me just lovely contrasts of colors that we get there. So the Telemati breakaway lions are somewhere in that area, somewhere down there, and also somewhere down there is where when I was on the Escape to Nature show, which was also manning these waterhole cameras, we saw a honey badger digging off in the sandy parts, just to the inflow of this little dam, I think going for sand frogs. And I saw him, I think it was 2 or 3 days in a row. He must have been getting into those frogs at that particular time, and so he kept returning.
Step into a world of discovery as you join Eco-Training's renowned courses in the heart of Kenya's Masai Mara. These courses are the perfect way to gain a deep understanding of the African bush, even if you have limited time. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to experience the wild in a meaningful and life-changing way. Enroll today and embark on a transformative journey with eco-training in Kenya's Masai Mara, the leading force in conservation education.
And that's almost a constant sound that we're going to be hearing from now on, the woodland kingfisher. Somewhere in the background, there's normally one calling all the way through summer. So always just check in the details around these water holes. You never know what you might spot. Some reptiles or something. A monitor lizard, maybe a terrapin, something trying to get some warmth so that it can get energy to be hunting and active. They're not going to have much luck today with sun, I think. So Bev, good question around mammal predators and the difficulties of raising their young. So Bev, I would say that it depends on the concentrations of predators. So for instance, here in these parts, very high concentration of large predators, from leopards to lions to hyenas, in particular spotted hyenas. So those three are very competitive with each other, and when they come across another predator's babies, obviously they immediately kill it, because it is exactly that, it's competition. So I think that is probably your biggest reason why the predators don't do so well here. Where we see on private game reserves, etc., where there's only, a limited number of large predators, most of their, if not all their babies survive, because they're not getting taken out every time they leave them and getting found by alternative predators and being killed. So I think that is probably your biggest factor. So it looks like Dewey's got a friend, most likely him, and I'm not sure who the other individual is. But there's at least two of them. And I've just had news that Dewey had a visitor here with him last night, and he was displaying too. So I wonder if it's a mate that he's found. I'm always hoping that Dewey does have some company. He seems to have a sort of a rolling interaction with different hippos that make their way into the area. There's a couple of water holes around, but he seems to prefer this one. I think he heads up towards Buffelshoek Dam and when he comes back. So sometimes he's not here. I think between there and here is where he moves, and then at night grazing in between. Wherever he lands up, I think then goes in there. Now, that just shows that there's not a high concentration of hippos in these parts because of there not being really established permanent water sources. This one is full now, but it wasn't for a number of years before it filled up. And so it doesn't really hold a lot of hippos. And for instance, if there was, these permanent water sources, and Dewey would go off to another water hole, he would find another bull there and in his territory. So they would then establish one water hole as their territory, and they will defend it, and they won't just be moving around like Dewey does. So Phil from Brighton, good question that, in around the pollution of rivers and if it's affected hippos. Of course, it always would affect them. It depends on the kind of pollution that it is. I'm sure that they could get, diseases from polluted water sources. But I'll dig into that a little bit deeper, and if there's any specific diseases that they could pick up. But as I say, it would all depend on what kind of pollution it is, um, because you can have just organic pollution, and an increase in that can sort of just change the dynamics of the water and increase plant life, etc. I don't think that would have a major issue with them, but there can be sewage, which I think then obviously would potentially bring in diseases for the hippos, but I haven't really heard of any examples. So I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper into that.
Whether you're a retiree, a recent graduate, or a professional seeking a change, the 55-day eco-training program is for you. With the coaching of experienced training guides, you'll embark on an unforgettable adventure that will give you a deep understanding of wildlife, conservation, and African cultures. If you sign up locally or internationally using this promo code, you'll receive 2,000 Rand off.
Levels and stable isotope signatures in lakes with hippos to those without. They found that cyanobacteria, also known as blue-green algae, was more prevalent in hippo-filled lakes, likely because the nutrients in mass quantities of hippo poop fertilize bacteria. This is disconcerting, says Shurin, because it can lead to problems like eutrophication or excess algae production that can lead to harmful algal blooms, similar to red tides. And other signs suggest that the animals are changing the chemistry of local water bodies. In hippo habitats, according to them as well, the amount of dissolved oxygen sometimes dipped below the level that fish can handle. What's more, just by moving their chunky bodies around, hippos can alter their environment, creating channels that give water more places to pool. And we spoke of this yesterday when we were discussing keystone species, where hippos are definitely one, because they completely change their environment around them. And that can make life harder for plants and animals that have adapted to an ecosystem without the big toothy animals. So they also note that the differences that were observed between hippo and non-hippo lakes were measurable but not dramatic. The quantities and varieties of invertebrates or zooplankton do not seem to have yet been impacted. That might change as the animals continue to multiply. If allowed to breed unchecked, there could be thousands of hippos within the next few decades. And the effects of hippos on the aquatic environment that we observe suggest that sustained population growth poses a threat to water quality in the lakes and rivers as they expand their range throughout the Magdalena Medio watershed and potentially colonize new regions on the Caribbean slope of Colombia. It's very, very interesting and a lasting legacy, I suppose, of Pablo Escobar. So they do go further in saying just what should be done about the hippos is a sticky issue. The main possibilities are sterilizing them, capturing and relocating them, or just killing them. The last option is obviously the least palatable. And people like that hippos, and they do attract tourists. So, but wrangling the volatile creatures so they can be relocated or castrated is also challenging, dangerous, and expensive. The process of moving just one juvenile hippo to a Colombian zoo in 2018 cost around $4,500, according to National Geographic. That's the issue that is always in place. I mean, we go across the board when we speak of the expanding population of elephants in the Madikwe Game Reserve. What to do next is the real underlying issue that needs to be spoken about and dealt with, or we leave it and allow the natural balance to assert itself. But it could be quite catastrophic at some stage in our eyes and not as palatable as if we do intervene. That's always the question. When do we intervene? We have already intervened, and so do we continue or do we let it try and restore some kind of balance? We've put a fence around them so they can't migrate anymore and go to greener pastures and return when it's recovered. So that question is the one that always remains in conservation. So I found another article that was written in 2014, and it was around there was highly acidic water from a dam at the Palaborwa-based Bosveld phosphate mine, which spilled into a tributary of the Olifants River, which runs through the Greater Kruger National Park, killing thousands of fish. And it's extensive pollution given the number of fish that was witnessed floating over a 15-kilometer stretch of the river. But they do say that they haven't seen any of the big animals affected, like hippos and crocodile. So I'm not sure how much that they are affected. I'm sure there must be some kind of effect that they do get living in the water. But they're not like amphibians where they breathe through their skin. So, obviously frogs are usually the first to go. They're an indicator species, so quite different to a keystone species. An indicator species are like amphibians that are so sensitive to the environment that if there's any change or pollution, they immediately are the worst affected, and so they die off. So we can very quickly identify when a river is polluted, suddenly when you have a frog die off. So I don't think that it actually affects them as much with all the fish dying, but no effect on the crocodiles and the hippos. But you might find with a lot of toxins, and this goes across the board, is that they build up through each generation, and it can even be so far as to doubling in each generation. So you might find in the future that these hippos, in fact, were affected but it didn't kill them. And maybe in future generations, we might find that we have some die off of hippos where they find some form of toxicity in them. We find we can relate this with humans as well. Um, with us, you wouldn't necessarily immediately die from ingesting insecticides and all sorts of pollutants, through farming and leaching, etc. But we are finding now much higher rates of cancer and neurological issues as a result of the toxins doubling in each generation. So when our parents say to us, "Ah, man, don't worry, we always used to eat that, nobody ever got sick," yeah, but the problem is now that the levels of toxicity within the new generations is double that of your parents, and then you pass that on double to your kids. So it does eventually have a very bad outcome, and not necessarily initially spotted as it would have been with the fish and the frogs and the crabs, etc., which kills them off immediately. We might find later on in generations to come. So we've got a very nice question here from Gareth ZA, asking what sort of effect does subterranean life have on the ecology of an area, and how does that life differ between arid and fertile environments? Most definitely, Gareth ZA. It has a very big impact on the ecology of an area. And I always have to refer back to fungi, because we always talk of plants being the sort of givers of life, but without mushrooms and fungi in general, um, maintaining the subterranean life below the soil, you wouldn't have any plants. So you've got nitrogen fixers and things that help the plants to actually take up nutrients and convert them into the different compounds that they require to make food, and chloroform, etc. Chlorophyll, excuse me, not chloroform. Yeah, that knocks you out. Um, so definitely, and I mean, if we look at the likes of these areas here, you can see a lot of plant growth, and that would indicate that there's a very good fungal network below the surface of the soil that is healthy, and as a result, you have a lot of grass growing. It does require particular conditions for it to survive, and one of those is obviously moisture as well within the surface, below the surface of the soil. So that would then result, and those climatic conditions and the amount of moisture would then result in that healthy mycorrhizal and fungal growth below the ground, resulting in good plant growth. As a result, then you would also have the animals that are able to feed on it. If we look in the deserts, it's too dry for that fungal growth, or it's very difficult for that fungal growth below the surface of the soil. So you have less plant growth, and very specialized plants, and probably very specialized fungal networks that only allow then for those specific plants to grow in those water scarce environments. But the subterranean life is probably more important than the growth above the surface of the soil, because that's where the health and the support system is found for the plants to provide the food for the animals that will then feed on them. So, good question there, Gareth. And I think if you look at the likes of termites as well, who obviously farm with these mushrooms and create nutrient hotspots, and all mainly below the surface of the soil as well. It does then lead to the ecology in the area being altered, normally in a much better way, and allowing for a lot of growth to take place. And we see that I love the termites that grow fungus, and we talk of Ikova in KwaZulu Natal, or the Umkowan, and the Omayova in Namibia. And those are the mushrooms that come out of the termite mounds. Some of them can get up to over a meter big and sort of half a meter wide, huge. But it's if they're another indicator species. If they are very healthy, the subterranean ecology is healthy, and so in those areas you also have very good plant growth, um, and as a result, very good animal life as well.
What if you could explore the world from an entirely new perspective? Flying a real drone live without leaving home. This is Nature Eye. Discover our planet's landscapes with a personal guide and a powerful camera. Every flight helps conserve the locations you visit. Book your adventure with Nature Eye.
Okay, so because I didn't know the exact numbers, I went searching just for this largest organism in the world. If you look on Wikipedia, it talks about the blue whale. However, I found a lovely scientific journal that speaks of, strange but true, the largest organism on Earth is a fungus. Next time you purchase white button mushrooms at the grocery store, just remember they may be cute and bite sized, but they've got a relative out west and it's obviously speaking of America, that occupies some 2,384 acres of soil in Oregon's Blue Mountains. Put another way, this humongous fungus would encompass 1,665 football fields, or nearly 4 square miles, 10 square kilometers of turf. The discovery of this giant Armillaria ostuae in 1998 heralded a new record holder for the title of the world's largest known organism, believed by most to be the 110-foot long, 200-ton blue whale. So it outdoes that by quite some distance. Based on its current growth rate, the fungus is estimated to be 2,400 years old, but could be as ancient as 8,650 years, that current living organism, which would earn it a place among the oldest living organisms as well. That is very, very incredible. A team of forestry scientists discovered the giant after setting out to map the population of this pathogenic fungus in eastern Oregon. Wow, I just find that incredible. And people often get fungus and mushrooms wrong because they think that when you see a mushroom, that is the mushroom, but in fact, that's just the fruit. So the mycelium, which is found below the surface of the soil, or it's found in a tree, it's in the substrate, which is literally what you can imagine as being the tree. That is the bigger part of the fungus itself, and the mushroom just being the fruit. And a way for it to reproduce. So what it does is the mushroom grows out and then it opens its gills and it releases its spores, which then can blow off with the wind and find a new suitable substrate and then begin growing the mycelial network, which then, as I say, forms the basis of the tree, which then the mushrooms that grow later are the fruits. So, and subsequently to the discovery of this massive fungal organism, they continued to find a number of other very large mushroom or fungus organisms. But ironically, the discovery of such huge fungal specimens rekindled the debate of what constitutes an individual organism. It's one set of genetically identical cells that are in communication with one another, that have a sort of common purpose, or at least can coordinate themselves to do something. Both the giant blue whale and the humongous fungus fit comfortably within this definition. So does the 6,615-ton colony of a male quarking aspen tree and his clones that cover over 107 acres of a Utah mountainside. So it's not the largest organism in the world, but it is definitely up there. And obviously very surprising to a lot of people that it belongs to a fungus. So it is a little bit quiet across the different locations with a bit of rain that is splattering about. That's why we are hanging here a little bit. At least we can see the hippos, and I'm sure we might spot some more animals moving through. And a little bit of technical difficulties at Okukuyu. So as soon as that's sorted out, maybe we'll jump back there. In the meantime, we'll just continue on here at Juma. It looks like these hippos may be thinking about exiting, or at least in some way, or are they just going on a little bit of a walkabout?
Africam brings the wild to you. Watch the big 5 at our Waterhole cameras. Indulge your passion for birding with the black eagles on the Black Eagle camera, flamingos at Camphor's Dam, and penguins at Stony Point. Listen to the soothing sounds of Lisbon Falls, or witness animals up close at Katai Pan. Imagine you're at the hide at Aldonio Lodge, gazing at elephants with the majestic Mount Kilimanjaro as your backdrop. Join us at Africam for an extraordinary wildlife adventure.
Sorry about that, a little bit of picture breakup. I think it might be the increment weather that's playing with the airwaves across the board, but it's working now. So hopefully long may it continue. This is a reasonable youngster, as I said. He's probably still in his teens. I'd say, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 13 years. So trunk up, smelling like that, normally indicating that there's something interesting in that direction that he wants to know about. Maybe there's another elephant approaching. So it is the time when we now do have access to our collaborator, and that is Africam. So we'll also be using or utilizing those cameras whenever there's some activity.